You didn't search for this. Maybe you were scrolling. Maybe you were killing time. Maybe you were half asleep going through motions that stopped meaning something to you a long time ago. But this video appeared, and you clicked. I'm not going to tell you that's a coincidence. I'm going to tell you something far more uncomfortable than that. There is a version of your life that is already written, not by fate, not by God, not by some invisible hand in the universe, written by other people, by systems, by the slow accumulation of choices you never actually made, choices that were made for you before you were old enough to question them. And right now, today, you are living inside that story, walking its hallways, following its schedule, performing its character. The question is whether you know it. Most people don't. Most people go to their graves never asking the question this video is about to ask you. So stay, because what I'm about to tell you is not comfortable. It is not meant to be. Comfort is what kept you inside the wrong life in the first place. Part 1. The life that was built for you. Here is something neuroscience confirmed decades ago that almost nobody applies to their own existence. Your brain did not develop in isolation. From the moment you were born, your nervous system was learning. Not from books, not from lectures, from environment, from the people around you, from what was rewarded and what was punished, from what was praised and what was ignored. This process has a name: social referencing. Before you could speak, before you could reason, before you had a single conscious opinion, you were scanning the people closest to you and absorbing their emotional reality as your own. Their fears became your fears. Their definition of success became your target. Their ceiling became your ceiling, not because you chose it, because your brain was built to survive inside a group, and survival inside a group meant learning the group's rules before you were old enough to reject them. By the time you had the cognitive capacity to question any of it, the career path that seemed obvious, the relationship model you assumed was normal, the standard of living everyone around you accepted, the identity you perform every day, it was already installed. It wasn't your choice, it was your inheritance. And here is the part that should disturb you. Most people never audit that inheritance. They spend their entire lives executing a program written by people who were themselves executing a program written by other people. A chain of borrowed lives stretching back further than anyone cares to look. You are not uniquely broken for this. Every human being on Earth begins inside someone else's story. The ones who escape are not smarter. They are not more gifted. They simply did one thing differently. They noticed. Part 2. The signs you are in the wrong life. There are symptoms. Most people mistake them for personal failure. They are not failure. They are data. The first symptom is chronic low-grade dread. Not depression, not anxiety in the clinical sense. A quieter thing. The feeling you get on Sunday evening. The subtle weight that settles over you when you think too clearly about your week ahead. The reason you stay up too late. Consuming anything, content, food, noise, to avoid the silence that asks uncomfortable questions. Neuroscience has a framework for this. When your actions are chronically misaligned with your values, the brain registers it as threat, a low-level, persistent activation of the stress response that never fully turns off because the source of the threat never goes away. You are not tired because life is hard. You are tired because you are spending enormous energy maintaining a self that is not yours. The second symptom is motivation that only works under pressure. You can perform when someone is watching, when there is a deadline, when there is consequence. But when the pressure lifts, when you have actual freedom, you freeze, you scroll, you delay. You cannot locate the drive to build something that nobody is forcing you to build. This is not laziness. This is what happens when a person has never learned what they actually want. You are highly trained to meet external standards and completely untrained to generate internal ones. The life that was built for you runs on external fuel. Remove the external pressure and the engine dies. The third symptom is the feeling that your achievements are hollow. You got the grade, you got the promotion, you checked the box, and then nothing. A brief flicker, and then back to the same weight, the same question you can't quite name. Psychology calls this hedonic adaptation, but there is a deeper layer that most explanations miss. When you achieve something that was never actually your goal, something inherited, assigned, borrowed from someone else's value system, the reward system does not fully activate. The brain knows, On some level below language, the brain knows the target was not yours, and it does not give you the full signal for a win that was not really a win. You are not ungrateful. You are misaligned. The fourth symptom, and the one nobody talks about, is the person you are in your head versus the person you perform in the world. There is a private version of you, the one with opinions that feel too dangerous to say, the one who wants something that doesn't fit neatly into your current story, the one who comes alive around certain ideas, certain conversations, certain moments, and then goes quiet again when the external world reasserts itself. That private version is not fantasy. That is closer to the real architecture of who you are. The gap between that person and the one you perform is the exact size of the life you are not living. Part 3. Why most people never change. Here is the part that separates understanding from action, and it is the part almost every motivational framework conveniently skips. Knowing your life is wrong is not enough. In fact, knowing your life is wrong and continuing to live it is one of the most psychologically painful states a human being can occupy. So the brain solves this problem, not by changing the life, but by changing the perception. This is called cognitive dissonance reduction, and it is surgical. The moment you feel the gap between your real self and your performed self, your brain begins generating explanations for why the gap is not that serious, why change is too risky, why this is just how things are, why people like you don't do things like that, why later is better than now. These are not thoughts. These are defense mechanisms dressed as thoughts, and they are extraordinarily convincing because they are generated by the same mind that needs to believe them. This is why most people do not change after one insight, one video, one book, one conversation. The insight creates momentary clarity. The defense mechanism absorbs it, and life continues. The people who actually change are not people who had a bigger insight. They are people who made the insight unavoidable for long enough that the defense mechanism could not fully close. Which brings us to the actual work. Part 4. How to identify your actual life. Not the life you are performing. Not the life that was handed to you. Your actual life. The one you would build if you had no audience, no history, no inherited expectations. This requires something most people are deeply uncomfortable with: radical subtraction. The standard approach to building a life is additive. Add more goals, add more achievement, add more identity markers, more credentials, more validation, more proof. This does not reveal who you are. It buries you deeper under what you have accumulated. The real question is not what do you want to add to your life. The real question is what survives when you remove everything that was placed there by someone else. Here is how you begin. Step 1. Audit the origin of your beliefs about success. Take the core metrics by which you currently measure whether your life is going well. Income level, relationship status, social standing, career trajectory, physical appearance. Now trace each one. Where did you learn this was the right measure? Who taught you this was the standard? When did you decide, consciously, deliberately, that this was your metric? Most people, when they do this honestly, discover that they cannot actually locate the moment of decision. The belief simply appeared. It was always already there. If you cannot find the moment you chose something, you did not choose it. And if you did not choose it, you are living by someone else's standard without their knowledge or permission. Step 2. Locate your intrinsic responses. The brain has two distinct motivation systems. The extrinsic system responds to reward and punishment from the environment: praise, income, social approval, fear of consequence. The intrinsic system responds to something internal: curiosity, meaning, genuine engagement, the experience of being fully present inside an activity. Most people have overdeveloped extrinsic systems and almost entirely atrophied intrinsic systems. They know what earns approval. They have forgotten what earns their own aliveness. To find your intrinsic responses, you cannot ask what you want. That question is too contaminated by what you have been taught to want. You ask a different question. When in the last month did time disappear for you? When were you so engaged in something that the performance layer, the self-consciousness, the monitoring of how you appear, temporarily went offline? That moment is data. That is the intrinsic system activating. Follow it. It is telling you something the extrinsic system has been trained to override. Step 3. Separate fear from wisdom. Not every impulse toward change is healthy, and not every resistance to change is cowardice. Discernment is required. The way to separate them is this: genuine wisdom about risk produces clear, specific, addressable concerns. It says, here is the actual problem. Here is what would need to be true. Here is what you could do. Fear dressed as wisdom produces vague catastrophizing. It says, you'll fail. You're not ready. Who do you think you are? This is not realistic. It does not engage with specifics because its purpose is not problem solving. Its purpose is stillness. When you feel resistance to building a different life, interrogate the resistance. Ask it to be specific. Ask it what would need to be true for the risk to be worth taking. If it cannot answer, if it only intensifies into vague dread, you are looking at fear, not wisdom. Fear is not a stop sign. Fear is a compass. It points directly at whatever matters enough to be worth protecting. Part 5. How to build your life deliberately. This is where most content stops being useful. Because most content tells you to follow your passion, believe in yourself, think positive, write your goals down. These instructions are not wrong. They are incomplete. They skip the architecture. Here is the architecture. The first layer is identity, not behavior. Behavioral change, new habits, new routines, new systems, fails at a rate that should embarrass the entire self-help industry. Not because people are weak, because behavior is downstream of identity. You cannot sustain actions that conflict with who you believe yourself to be. The brain is a prediction machine. It constantly models reality based on prior patterns. When you try to install a new behavior without changing the underlying identity model, the brain experiences it as noise, interference, anomaly, and it works to resolve the anomaly by reverting you to the pattern that fits the model. The path of least resistance is always toward who you believe you are. So the first layer of building your life deliberately is not changing what you do. It is changing your answer to the question, who am I? Not who were you trained to be? Not who does your environment expect? Who are you deliberately as a chosen declaration? This is not delusional. This is how identity actually works. Identity was never a fixed, discovered thing. It was always a construction. You were simply not conscious of who was doing the construction. Now, you become the architect. The second layer is environment design. Your willpower is not a moral quality. It is a resource, and it depletes. This is established, replicated neuroscience. Decision fatigue is real. Ego depletion is real. The idea that a strong enough person can override their environment through sheer discipline is a myth that benefits no one except people who profit from your continued failure. The people who build deliberate lives do not rely on willpower. They design environments where the deliberate choice is the easy choice. This means auditing everything your current environment is silently training you to be. The people you spend time with and what their presence is normalizing. The information streams you absorb daily and what worldview they are installing without your consent. The physical spaces you occupy and what behaviors they make frictionless versus difficult. Every element of your environment is either building the life you chose or eroding it. There is no neutral input. The third layer is time allocation as identity expression. You can tell me anything about who you are and what matters to you. But your calendar does not lie. Where your hours go is your actual set of values, regardless of what you say your values are. The gap between your stated values and your time allocation is the gap between the life you claim to want and the life you are actually building. This is not about grinding. This is about honesty. If something genuinely matters to you, it exists in your schedule. If it does not exist in your schedule, it does not genuinely matter to you yet, or you have not yet made the decision to make it matter. Both are honest answers. Neither is failure. Both require different responses. The deliberate life is not the life where you do everything perfectly. It is the life where you close the gap between what you say and where your time goes. The fourth layer is tolerance for the period of not knowing. This is the layer nobody prepares you for, and it is the layer where most attempts at building a deliberate life collapse. When you begin extracting yourself from an inherited life and building a chosen one, there is a period in between. A period where the old identity no longer fits, but the new one is not yet solid. Where you have enough self-awareness to see what is wrong, but not yet enough clarity to see what is right. This period is not failure. It is exactly what transition looks like. The psychological term is identity moratorium, a state of suspension between identities. It is deeply uncomfortable. The brain, which craves prediction and stability, will experience this period as threat and generate enormous pressure to return to something familiar, even if familiar meant miserable. Surviving this period requires one thing above all: the ability to tolerate ambiguity without catastrophizing it. Not knowing who you are becoming is not evidence that you are broken. It is evidence that you are mid-process. The caterpillar inside the chrysalis has dissolved into biological material with no structure and no form. It is not failing to be a butterfly. It is becoming one. The discomfort of not knowing is the price of transformation. There is no version where you skip it. You did not find this video. This video found you, not because of fate, not because of magic, because somewhere in you, below the performance and the noise and the borrowed story, something is still awake, something that has not yet fully accepted the life that was handed to it, something that still knows the difference between existing and actually being alive. That signal brought you here. What you do with it is the only question that matters now. Most people will watch this, feel something, and return to the previous program. The defense mechanism will engage. The familiar will reassert itself. The insight will be absorbed and neutralized, and the inherited life will continue. Some people will not let that happen. They will sit with what they felt watching this. They will ask the questions they have been avoiding. They will begin the uncomfortable, non-linear, deeply real process of building something that is actually theirs. I cannot tell you which one you are. You cannot even tell you which one you are. Not based on intention, not based on how motivated you feel right now in this moment. You can only tell based on what you do next. The video has found you. The rest is yours.